"May I play for something to eat?" The timid words of a 12-year-old girl rang through the grand lobby of the Continental Hotel, slicing through the refined chatter like a sudden knife. Conversations faltered. Heads turned toward the small black girl daring to intrude on the city's most exclusive charity gala. Amelia Washington stood at the threshold of the main hall, her wide, pleading eyes fixed on the Steinway grand piano shimmering beneath the crystal chandeliers. Her plain, slightly oversized clothing clashed sharply with the sequined gowns and tailored suits around her. Clutching a battered backpack tightly to her chest, she seemed to be shielding herself from the glittering world before her. "How did she even get in here?" muttered a platinum-haired woman, gripping her champagne flute with unease. "Where's security?" another whispered. The irony was bitter. The evening's event was meant to raise money for disadvantaged children. Children like Amelia, who had spent the last week rotating between shelters. She'd stumbled upon the gala by chance, passing the hotel earlier that day, and something inside urged her to step inside. Victoria Sterling, the host of the evening and heir to a vast fortune, approached with graceful deliberation. At 45, she embodied the city's aristocracy, educated, polished, and deeply assured of her own moral superiority. "Sweetheart," she said with a saccharine smile, "this isn't the place for you. There's a McDonald's 2 blocks away. I just want to play." Amelia answered softly but with surprising resolve. "One song, for a plate of food." Ripples of laughter broke out. "She thinks she can play the piano," scoffed a man in a navy suit. "She probably can't even find middle C." "How adorable," another woman added with false pity. "Children these days think life is like the movies." But Amelia did not flinch. Her chin remained high, her posture carrying a quiet dignity far beyond her years. It was as though she possessed a secret no one else in the glittering hall could fathom. From the back, Dr. Robert Chun, a celebrated pianist and judge for national competitions, watched with keen interest. The way the girl's gaze lingered on the piano wasn't casual curiosity. It was recognition, reverence. "Victoria," Dr. Chun said as he stepped forward, "perhaps we should let her try. Isn't this gala meant to support gifted youth?" Victoria's laugh rang out like shattering glass. "Oh, Robert, look at her. Children like that don't have access to music lessons. It's simply impossible." What no one in the room knew was that music had been Amelia's first language. For the first 8 years of her life, she had lived with her grandmother, Betty Washington, a brilliant classical pianist denied recognition because of her race. Betty had been Amelia's sole teacher. When she passed away, Amelia was thrust into the foster system, carrying nothing but grief and an unshaped talent she barely understood. Now, in the glittering ballroom, Amelia's fingers twitched unconsciously as if brushing invisible keys, an old habit to steady herself during hard nights. "If you've been moved by stories of resilience," a narrator's voice seemed to whisper, "remember this moment, when one innocent request would silence prejudice and reveal a gift that could shatter assumptions about human potential." Victoria crossed her arms, her smile sharp as glass. "Fine, dear," she said, dripping with mock sympathy. "Since you're so insistent, let's make a deal." The crowd drew in closer, sensing spectacle. Victoria thrived under the spotlight, especially when she could flaunt her dominance before the city's elite. "Condition 1, you will play only one piece of our choosing. Condition 2, if you perform it well, I'll buy you a full dinner myself. But," she paused for effect, "when you fail, as we all know you will, you must leave at once and never trouble respectable people again." A faint protest arose from an older woman in the back. "That's cruel." But her words were drowned out by laughter and murmurs of approval. Amelia didn't blink. Her eyes stayed locked on the piano, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. "When others try to diminish you, let the music speak, my love. Music never lies. It knows no prejudice." "I accept," Amelia said firmly. Dr. Chun's attention sharpened. In 3 decades of evaluating pianists, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something in the girl's poise stirred them now. "Perfect," Victoria declared, clapping her hands. "No, which song?" Her eyes landed on James Morrison, a mediocre pianist who entertained at local bars. "James, darling, what should our little prodigy attempt?" James smirked. "How about Beethoven's Für Elise? Everyone who's ever touched a piano tries it. If she knows anything at all, she should manage." The crowd chuckled knowingly. Für Elise was a beginner's piece in reputation only. To play it with precision demanded skill honed over years. It was the perfect trap. Excellent, Victoria agreed. A song every child with a piano lesson knows. No excuses. Amelia gave a slight nod and moved toward the instrument. Each step carried such quiet resolve that even a few guests in the back shifted uneasily. There was something unnatural about a 12-year-old facing humiliation with such composure. She slid onto the bench, adjusting it with practiced precision. Dr. Chun's breath caught. Those were not the gestures of a novice. Look at her. Victoria sneered to those nearest her. She doesn't even know how to sit properly. Clearly, she's never touched a real piano. But Dr. Chun saw the opposite. The impeccable posture. The way her hands hovered in perfect classical alignment. These were details only years of training could impart. In Amelia's mind, the ballroom melted away. She was back in her grandmother's small house, the upright piano filling the room with life. Betty Washington, once barred from the city's conservatory in the 1960s, had poured her passion into teaching neighborhood children. Music is a universal language, Amelia, Betty used to say, guiding her granddaughter's hands across the keys. Play from the heart, and they'll hear with their souls, not their eyes. Amelia had spent countless hours at that piano, absorbing not just technique, but the deep truth of music as connection. Now, though Betty was gone and her world had fractured, that truth remained her constant companion. And tonight, it was about to be heard. We're waiting, Victoria said, tapping her manicured nails against her armrest. Or have you already surrendered before trying? Amelia inhaled deeply and placed her hands on the keys. The touch was electric. After months without a real instrument, the cool ivory beneath her fingertips felt like reclaiming a missing part of her soul. The very first note rang out with a crystalline purity that startled more than a few listeners. It wasn't the clumsy sound of a beginner, but the confident strike of someone deeply familiar with the piano. Dr. Chown, drawn by instinct, edged closer. That single note revealed flawless technique, perfect attack, measured sustain, and impeccable tone control. Such details weren't the result of luck. They reflected years of disciplined training. Coincidence? Victoria muttered under her breath, though her poise had already begun to crack. Then Amelia began the main theme of Fur Elise. Each note spilled effortlessly, woven into something far greater than the simple melody the guests expected. There was no hesitation, no stumbling. The music breathed through her as naturally as life itself. But what struck Dr. Chun most was the emotional depth. How she shaped phrases, balanced dynamics, and even allowed silence to carry meaning. This was artistry, not mimicry. The hall fell into complete stillness. Champagne glasses froze midair. Conversations died. Even the waitstaff stood motionless, hypnotized by the fragile figure conjuring unexpected beauty at the grand piano. Victoria's stomach tightened. This was not the humiliating spectacle she had planned. Instead, she was losing control of the room to the very girl she sought to ridicule. As Amelia poured herself into the music, a single question rose in every mind present: who was this child? Dr. Chun's pulse quickened. After 40 years of judging pianists, his instincts screamed the truth. What he was hearing defied reason. Her execution wasn't merely proficient, it was extraordinary. The descending arpeggios, notorious for tripping up even advanced players, cascaded from her hands with liquid clarity. Each note was deliberate, each rest meaningful. Even her use of the pedal displayed the mastery of a seasoned performer. This is impossible, he whispered to himself, edging even closer. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Victoria tried to reassert control. She must have memorized it from some YouTube tutorial. She announced loudly, forcing a laugh. Children copy everything these days. But the excuse fell flat. What Amelia was creating transcended imitation. This was not mechanical repetition. It was interpretation alive with emotion and wisdom far beyond her years. Dr. Chun had met child prodigies before, from tiny hands flawlessly executing Mozart to teenagers tackling Rachmaninoff. Yet he had seldom witnessed this combination of flawless skill and profound maturity, especially from someone with a background so unlikely. Amelia reached the piece's climax, where the theme surged back with renewed force. Her fingers danced across the keyboard with an intimacy that betrayed countless hours of devotion. No one could fake that bond with an instrument. As the hall listened, memories seeped into Amelia's music like hidden currents. She heard her grandmother Betty's voice whispering through time, "Music isn't just about the right notes, child. It's about telling the story only you can tell." Betty Washington had been more than Amelia's teacher, she was a visionary. Born in 1940, In an era that closed doors to black pianists, Betty refused silence. Denied conservatories and concert stages, she transformed her home into a sanctuary of music, welcoming children from the neighborhood to discover that classical music belonged to them too. The world will insist that some things aren't for people like us, Betty would say while correcting Amelia's posture at the bench. But music knows nothing of color, or poverty, or limits. It only knows truth. For 8 precious years, Amelia absorbed not just the mechanics of piano, but her grandmother's philosophy. She learned that every composer spoke a different language: Chopin of longing, Beethoven of struggle and triumph, Mozart of crystal joy. And most importantly, she discovered that her own voice, too, had a place in that eternal conversation. When Betty died suddenly of a heart attack, Amelia lost more than her grandmother. She lost her anchor. The foster care system stripped her not only of family, but of music, of the piano, of everything that gave her life meaning. For 4 long years, she carried melodies only inside her mind, tracing imaginary keys across the air or the chipped tables of shelter dormitories. But now, in this surreal moment inside the grand hall of the Continental Hotel, it all came rushing back. Every lesson, every gentle correction, every whispered encouragement from Betty poured through her hands as though time itself had never passed. Dr. Chun stood transfixed as Amelia approached the final coda of the piece. Her control over dynamics, beginning in the softest pianissimo, swelling into a majestic forte, then returning to the fragile hush of the opening, spoke of an interpretive understanding that usually required decades to achieve. "Please," he murmured to the colleague beside him, a piano professor from the local university, "tell me you're witnessing this too. She's not just gifted, she's extraordinary." Victoria Sterling felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. What she had engineered as a cruel public shaming was unraveling before her eyes. Instead of reinforcing her prejudices, Amelia was forcing the room to reconsider everything they thought they knew about class, race, and talent. "It must be some trick," Victoria whispered to her inner circle, her voice shaking. "No one learns to play like that without expensive lessons. She must have been secretly trained." But even as she spoke, the words rang hollow. The girl's playing carried something money could never buy: soul, memory, and a depth born from struggle, not privilege. Amelia let the final notes of Ferilis drift into silence. The last chord played so delicately that half the audience unconsciously held their breath. She kept her hands hovering over the keys for a suspended moment, unwilling to sever the invisible bond between herself and the instrument. Only then did she slowly turn toward the crowd. The timid child who had asked to play for food was gone. In her place sat a young artist who had just claimed a seat at the table of human greatness, speaking fluently in the universal language of music. Dr. Chun broke the spell first, his palms meeting in a quiet, reverent applause that echoed like distant thunder through the chamber. Gradually, others followed until the gilded walls of the Continental reverberated with authentic acclaim. Victoria's chest tightened with panic. Her scheme had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. Worse, she saw the same dawning realization in the eyes of her peers. If we were so wrong about her, what else might we be wrong about? Amelia remained still, letting the applause wash over her like cleansing rain after a drought. Inside, she felt no arrogance, only the stirrings of awareness that her music had revealed a power greater than she had ever claimed for herself. This was just the beginning. Dr. Chun approached with the reverence of a man stepping toward something sacred. "Child," he said softly, awe in his tone, "may I ask where you studied? Your teacher must be remarkable." Amelia met his eyes. For a fleeting moment, the sorrow of the last 4 years flickered across her face. "My grandmother taught me," she answered simply. "She always said music was the one thing no one could ever take away." The reply struck Dr. Chun like a lightning bolt. Not conservatories, not elite tutors, family. Not wealth, but love. A prodigy nurtured at home, not by institutions. Everything he thought he knew about the making of a great artist was being rewritten by a 12-year-old girl. The hall still hummed with uneasy admiration. Amelia sensed she had crossed an invisible threshold. She could no longer pass as just a hungry child pleading for kindness. Her performance had revealed too much, promised too much. Now the weight of expectation hung in the air, thick as perfume, and she knew she had to decide just how far she was willing to take it. Dr. Chun's voice trembled as he spoke again. "Young lady, I must ask you something important. What is your full name?" "Amelia Washington," She replied with the same unshakable calm that had carried her all evening. The name hit him like a shockwave. His eyes widened, and he staggered back a step. Washington, Betty Washington. Are you her granddaughter? Amelia nodded once. Dr. Chan covered his face with his hands. My God, he whispered. Betty Washington was one of the greatest pianists this country ever produced. She should have performed on the world's finest stages. His voice cracked under the weight of old grief. Victoria's discomfort deepened. Robert, what are you saying? Who exactly is Betty Washington? Dr. Chan turned toward her, his expression a mix of disbelief and disgust. Victoria, Betty Washington was a legend. A virtuoso denied the stages she deserved because of her skin color. She became one of the most revered private teachers in America, shaping the careers of countless professional musicians. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some recognized the name, recalling stories whispered in music circles of a woman whose teaching could transform raw talent into artistry. But that was decades ago. Victoria protested, her tone defensive, almost pleading. Even if your story is true, it doesn't erase the fact that she's just a homeless child begging for scraps at a private gala. At that moment, Amelia rose gracefully from the piano bench. For the first time that night, Amelia let her true self rise to the surface. The timid posture vanished, replaced by a commanding dignity that made several guests shift back instinctively. Miss Sterling, Amelia said, her voice steady and resolute. You were right about one thing. I shouldn't be here this evening. She paused, letting the silence deepen. I should be at Carnegie Hall in New York, where I have a recital scheduled next week. A stunned hush swept across the ballroom. My name is Amelia Washington. She continued, her tone unwavering. I am the youngest pianist ever admitted into Juilliard's Young Artists program. I am also the reigning national champion in the under-15 classical piano competition. Again, she let her words hang in the air, forcing them to land. The reason I am here tonight has nothing to do with needing food or charity. Dr. Chun's eyes widened as the fragments began falling into place. The documentary, he whispered. You're filming the documentary. Amelia gave a small nod. Exactly. I'm working with PBS on a project about prejudice and access to the arts. My producer encouraged me to attend fundraising events like this one disguised as a child without means, to capture how those with privilege treat people they assume are beneath them. The revelation detonated like a bomb in the room. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. You're recording us? She stammered. Hidden cameras, Amelia confirmed calmly. High-definition audio and video. Everything that unfolded tonight has been captured for national broadcast. Victoria spun in panic, scanning the corners of the room as if she could spot the evidence. That's illegal. You can't record us without permission. Actually, Dr. Chun interjected, his voice edged with grim satisfaction. You did give permission. Every guest signed an image release. It's printed right on the ticket. This event could be filmed for documentary purposes. He smiled wryly. I suppose no one bothers reading the fine print. A wave of anxiety rippled through the audience. People whispered, some fumbling for their tickets, others reaching for their phones. The air grew thick with unease. The first segment of the documentary, Amelia continued, unfazed by the rising commotion, explores how talent is often dismissed when it appears in forms that defy privileged expectations. The second shows how self-proclaimed champions of the arts react when faced with genuine artistry from unexpected places. I didn't invent anything. I simply revealed who you really are when you thought no one was watching. Dr. Chun stepped closer, his voice soft with respect. And what do you intend to do with this recording? It will air nationwide next month, Amelia explained. I also run a YouTube channel where I share shorter versions of these experiments. My most recent video, filmed at a similar gala in Boston, has already reached 2.5 million views. People care deeply when hypocrisy is exposed, especially from those who preach virtue while practicing prejudice. The crowd watched in horrified silence as Victoria grasped the full scope of her downfall. Within days, millions would witness her cruelty, and her name would forever be bound to the arrogance and elitism she had displayed so openly. Mrs. Sterling, Amelia said, turning directly to her, you've spent this entire evening insisting that people like me don't belong here, that we have no worth, no talent, no right to participate in culture. But tomorrow, the whole world will see exactly the kind of person you are. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came. The weight of her impending disgrace rendered her speechless. "Doctor." Chun glanced around the hall, taking in the pale faces and restless whispers. "How many events have you filmed?" "This is the 12th. Amelia answered evenly. "And every time it's the same. People who claim to honor art and education are the first to dismiss talent when it doesn't come wrapped in privilege." She faced Victoria one last time. "The difference between you and me, Mrs. Sterling, is that when I truly was homeless after my grandmother's death, I learned something you never have. Dignity doesn't come from money or status. It comes from how we treat others when we believe no one is watching." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every guest in the hall understood that their words and actions that evening would soon be scrutinized by millions of strangers, and most knew there was no possible justification for what they had revealed about themselves. As Amelia quietly retrieved a small recording device from her backpack, one question hung heavy in the air of the Continental Hotel: how many privileged, prejudiced people before them had only realized too late that the child they had scorned possessed the power to expose their true nature to the entire world. 6 months later, Victoria Sterling stood at the window of her modest apartment, staring down at the limousine pulling up in front of Carnegie Hall. Amelia Washington, radiant in a concert gown, waved gracefully to adoring fans before stepping inside to make her debut as the youngest soloist of the season. The documentary Faces of Discrimination had exploded online, amassing more than 15 million views on YouTube alone. Victoria had become a national emblem of elitist hypocrisy. She lost her positions on charitable boards, her reputation in high society, and the clients who once clamored for her luxury event services. Local headlines were relentless: former charity organizer exposed as prejudiced in viral documentary. Stripped of influence, she now worked as a junior assistant at a small law firm, struggling to piece together a reputation that would likely never recover. Meanwhile, Dr. Chun had stepped fully into the role of Amelia's mentor, guiding her through the labyrinth of professional classical music. The Continental Hotel, eager to cleanse its tarnished image, launched a scholarship fund for underprivileged musicians and named Amelia as its official ambassador. Music has no color, no social class, no zip code, Amelia declared in her first national interview after the scandal. It only recognizes truth and passion, and when you carry both, nothing can stand in your way. The ripple effects of the documentary extended far beyond entertainment. Music schools nationwide began building community outreach programs. Conservatories revised their admissions processes. Countless gifted young people from overlooked communities were suddenly being offered opportunities that had long been denied. Watching Amelia's rise where she had once tried to orchestrate her downfall, Victoria finally absorbed the harshest lesson of her life: dignity and talent cannot be purchased with wealth, inherited with a name, or measured by skin color or address. Amelia's greatest revenge was never in destroying Victoria. It was in proving that authentic greatness surpasses prejudice, and that the most extraordinary gifts often come from those least expected. If this story of resilience and triumph has stirred your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring journeys that remind us true excellence always finds its path, no matter how many obstacles stand in its way.